Yo, what up? Let's get it popping here in a second, man. Gotta organize, gotta organize stuff, and as as usual, stay hydrated, boys and girls, and my theys. Love you guys too. Fix the camera. I was doing TikToks, and apparently my my phone throws off the balance of my tripod ring light or whatever. So I need to figure out how to get rid of that glare. Probably just need to move my fucking ew. I won't regret this later, putting this glass very close to the edge. Or I'll regret it immediately. Only time will tell. And mouth guard. Got a tournament coming up this week. Gotta do that thing. So basically, like, I have a tournament. It's first tournament of the new year for me. So I have to spend a shit ton of time finding things that I own but misplace after tournaments, because it's such a flurry of things that you have to get done. You spend a shit ton of time like trying to make sure you don't forget any equipment, and then you just jam all your stuff into a bag. And then you sort it out when you get home. So, or if you're like me, you sort it out when it's time for the next tournament. So there's that. That's me, buddy. That's me right there. Got the chat box added in and everything. Oh, there's already a chat box in here. My bad. I don't know why I did that. Yeah. What the fuck? Alert box? Is alert box on here? Yeah, it's on there. I got two of them for some reason. Yeah, we're talking NFL football today, baby. You know how it goes. NFL only. NFL only. If you got shit you need to say it in the comments. Trying to finish up some notes here. Ooh, in the wrong window. There we go. Yeah, we about to power through a bunch of these, man, because the ones that didn't have any playoff implications, I'm not going to waste my time talking about them. I did watch plenty of games that actually had no playoff significance. I just wanted to see what they would look like. Also, I just like watching football, so this is the time of the year where you get to see guys who don't play very much, and they get to do cool stuff sometimes. But it's all good. But it's all good. Oh, man. Haven't been hit up by any New Year's resolutioners, which is dope. I really appreciate that. If you're a person you have people in your life that work out on a regular basis, the last thing that they want to do is hear from you about how you want to work out with them, especially if they're a person who's significantly stronger than you. I'm sure they would love to help you and stuff like that, but helping you is not going to help their training. Unless they unless they ask you or something. But for the most part, you, person who's not at their strength level, is gonna, kind of hold them back because it's gonna increase the amount of time you have to spend switching weights and shit. Yo, that would be sick. There's Dan Lust. You should follow him at Sports Law Lust. Reported Marshawn Lynch is apparently a target for Amazon, who's taking over Thursday Night Football here pretty soon, and he's a target to like basically report on each city that Thursday Night Football is in every single week. So that's interesting. Jesus Christ, man! I have an article open for Sports Illustrated, and it is just like I can only look at 2 paragraphs at a time with how much space is taken up by ads. That new company that owns them, it's like a man, what's the type of firm that broke up? They buy things that are like super cheap and then try and maximize the profit and then sell it. Basically, they like pump and dump like entire companies instead of just individual stocks. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, weird stuff. We're almost done here. I'm almost done. Basically, pasting in stats that I found because, like I said, I'm not gonna waste your time breaking down games that didn't mean anything, and on top of that, were not interesting. Like, there's a lot of teams that just like, I'm out. And I'm not even talking about like playoff teams. Some teams just kind of, oh man. Wow. Good times. Ooh, there it is. The Sad Boys. That was pretty funny to me. I love how the 49ers made the playoffs. Like, did not look like a playoff team a good chunk of the season. Got like a little bit better, but still was like slightly sketchy. And now here we are. Probably the sketchiest team in the playoffs. Let's be for real. Whatever. I need to go to. It's so weird because like I know I'm live on YouTube right now, and I have my personal YouTube account. It's got like fitness stuff and all that kind of jazz and information type shit. But my live stream does not show up on my own. Like, it doesn't show up at all. It's so weird. I have to like go out of my way to get it to pop up, and it like even then, I have to like click on my actual stream. Like, it never shows up live. There we go. Mute that. Open up Twitch real quick, and we'll get it poppin', ladies and gents. Yo, honestly, best investment I made last year was building this PC, and I realized that like more and more each day, because this thing is like insane. Because I can monitor myself in like 4 different ways while this is going like on live streams 4 different ways, and I feel like I could still. Like, I feel like I could watch a movie, like, on live stream type shit. Or I can go live, like, playing a video game or something, which would be sick. But, yeah. Might do some of that. We'll see. So I can actually, I am on Twitch, so my job is to actually, actually go live and do video games. Cool. We passed all the sound checks. It's a question of if we're going to pass the vibe check, which only time will tell, ladies and gents. And theys, kings and queens and royalty, as I've been told to say. Didn't even try and do that on purpose, by the way. Where am I hitting myself? Where's the feedback at? Muted. Oh no, Twitch is not muted. There we go. What we do need to do. What we do. Corey Graves is trending on Twitter. I guess that's good for him. That's a country music singer, right? He's either a country music singer or a wrestler. Oh, he's a wrestler. Yeah, apparently he has been cleared after being out of the ring for 7 years. Good for him. I wonder what he did for 7 years. Because I don't think, the fact that I didn't know that he was a wrestler, or the fact that I was like, is he a wrestler? Is he a hip-hop, or is he a country music artist? It makes me think, like, maybe he didn't make a shit ton of money, but then again, there's a lot of people who I don't know that make a lot of money on a regular basis. So, if Corey Graves has got it like that, was he like hot shit when he was in the streets? These wrestling streets. Shout out to him though. Sounds like something was wrong, and now it's not. So that's a great place to be. I don't know if Corey Graves is a bad person or not, but he seems to be a healthy person now. Clutch to him. Week 18 of the NFL season with me. Let's get some of these hashtags in the mix. NFL playoffs. NFL football. I am a Twitch streamer. I should probably use that hashtag. Twitch streamer, YouTube. One day there's going to be people who just like consistently show up and chat it up with me. I don't know how that's going to happen or when that's going to happen, but it's going to be someday. Someday, we can only hope. Or, honestly, man, I made like 5 TikToks yesterday, and I think they're all still under 100 views or whatever. And I was kind of like, no, I got to get on that grind, you know what I mean? Because I got, like, honestly, this is a list of TikTok ideas. I'm not going to show it to you, of course. This is a list of TikTok ideas, and I've been trying. My theory was I'm going to do one every day. Yeah. I was just like trying to do one every single day, especially leading up to the playoffs and stuff like that. And then hopefully I can cook up some more ideas. This week, without my friends in town, like without my, like one of my groups of friends was like completely out of town because they are on a cruise where people are 100% vaccinated and nobody's tested positive yet for COVID. So, which is clutch, you know. If there was ever a place to be, it's an all-you-can-eat resort that's on the water, away from people, in case the zombie apocalypse pops off. You never know when that could be. You gotta stay ready. You don't have to get ready. You need to stay ready for the zombie apocalypse. Let's be on the real. You know what you're doing, you know what you're doing, you know what I mean? Oh man, maybe we'll cook in a hydration break, because I use that to put fucking tweets out for the show. And I need that. I really do. Man, I honestly... Man, I used to be so whack, bro. Yo, really though. I used to be so whack at it, and me scrolling back on my timeline, like that Time Hop. By the way, shout out Time Hop for like coming up with something that was really basic and then getting bought for millions of dollars by Facebook for it. Shout out to you, but yeah, what is this? Medical licensing exam. All right. Anyway, but yeah, I realize now I was a terrible. I see why people didn't like me. I say people didn't like me, but like people did like me when I was a kid. But like I don't get why. Maybe they had faith that I would become a good person at some day, and you know maybe they had faith that I would become a person who aspires to be a good person one day. Because Jesus, some of the shit I used to put on Facebook was fucking stupid. Like. Just like unnecessary and unsolicited information about myself, which many could argue I'm still doing that, but I'm just trying to do it with purpose now to make millions of dollars, to become $100 million guy. We'll see. Oh shit. Oh. Ooh. Yo. Man, what is Reese? There we go. Every time I see a social media job, I send it to this kid that I used to know when I covered high school sports. And cuz he wanted to like get into sports media and shit. And so every time I see a job, I think his girlfriend has like a I think his girlfriend has a... Is Hunter Renfro's DMs open? I think Hunter Renfro has open DMs, which is weird. Yeah, nah. There's just this kid that I used to know. And so I tell him all... I send him these jobs that I see. Even though, like, he doesn't need it. He's a grown-ass man now, but, you know, you never know if he saw it or not. But he wanted to, like, get into sports media, and his whole thing was, like, he wanted to do videography and graphic design. So every time I see one, there he is. I don't know why it didn't come up. What the fuck? Yeah, he moved to Phoenix, and you know, he's always wanted to get into the game. I'm assuming it will be a major pay drop because that's how sports works. People take advantage of the fact that you want to live your dream, so they pay you nothing for a shit ton of talent. So there's a lot of talented people that are severely underpaid. Like legitimately, the number of people who get priced out of sports media is ridiculous. And I can tell you, because I saw. Did I like the tweet? Hold on. I think I liked the tweet. Shit. Hold on. I did not mean to click on that. Actually, yes, I did. I know we're like way off base on this, but nonetheless, there's a reporter that I saw that was her thing. Like, she tweeted about, I was living at my parents' house, which, by the way, same, still doing that. About to turn 30. Yes, I am that way. There it is. Naomi Melita Gray. She tweeted about this. She works for Fox 54 News, and I have no idea where that is. I have no idea. Let me look at where Fox 54 News is. Is it New York? She works for Fox in the Tennessee Valley, so I guess in Tennessee. Anyway, she is like from Brooklyn, and she tweeted out, from moving back in with my parents and living off unemployment to covering the national championship, and put hashtag blessings, which, you know, I'd like to give you a little bit more credit than you're willing to give yourself. I feel like you worked really hard to get there, especially considering being black and in sports media is hard as shit. So, shout out to you. Shout the fuck out. But yeah. I don't know how old she is. I'm assuming she's way younger than me. Most people who are doing sports media now, most people who are at my level in sports media, which is level 0, are indeed significantly younger than me. Because I guess my big thing that I should have done was stick with high school sports. Anyway, what the fuck? All right, we got those tweets out. Don't worry. We got the tweets popping, guys. You guys know how that goes. We're just going to talk about football for a little bit. We're just going to vibe and talk about football because there's a lot of cool shit that people did. And there was also, like I said, I was reading that article on Sports Illustrated. It is crazy how many ads they fucking had. Anyway, we got the game open. We got a game open. We are going to be using our handy dandy Pro Football Reference as well, because I did not get a chance to look at pressure numbers. I just eyeballed the pressure, aka I watched the games and told you what I thought. But yeah, we need to get this open real quick. Hold on. We need to open up one other app. All right. We're just gonna go in raw, guys. We're just gonna go in raw. No sound check on the theme song. I put Mio in my water bottle, and there's like still a nasty after flavor on it. All right, let's pop it. 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else in between, I'm Ashton Gene Lewis. This is the Broke Boy Sports Podcast. To be more specific, it is episode 174. Don't have any cool numbers to connect it to or anything like that. It is 12:50 on a Wednesday. 12:50, just past noon on January 12th, Wednesday, in case you're a person that still is struggling to keep track of time and dates because of the global pandemic we seem to be perpetually stuck in, mainly because what we do is very reactive to COVID. None of it is actually preventative because we have allowed the thoughts of idiots to become important within the grand scheme of the world that we live in. Yes, I went there to start off the show. Anyway, we have other things to talk about. Those other things are football, ladies and gents. This is the last of the because after this it'll just be the regular show. Maybe we'll think about doing 2 shows a week for NBA stuff, but and maybe try and get an interview every single week, because that is the one part that this podcast, that is of course run and operated 100% by your boy, truly fucking struggles with, and that is getting guests consistently. As you've seen, we've had guests on the show before. I figured out the whole NDI situation so that I can actually have video screen chatting and all that kind of stuff like that put together. But yeah, it's been rough, man. That's the one area that I really want to attack in the second. Well, this is coming up on year 3, because I think the birthday of the pod is I think the birthday of the pod is the 15th. I think the pod's birthday is the 15th. I have to check again. But nonetheless, shout out to everybody who's been listening. I think our goal last year was to get to 3,000 downloads. I have not checked that. I know that we got well over 3,000 combined views and downloads. Don't know how many we got in individual downloads. I'll post a graphic about it. But shout out to everybody who helped with the goal, even when the show was sketchy about when it was going to actually go live. I appreciate that. But nonetheless, we got football to talk about. The last week of the regular season popped off, and actually I was looking at my phone if you're watching on the video stream, because we are simulcasting on Twitch and on YouTube. I was looking at my phone so that I can open up and give you the results, the final results of our money line stuff that we did for picking we picked almost every single game of the regular season because there were some Thursday night football games that I forgot that were mixed in there. But I do my percentage out of the total of games that I picked, so we're good. I finished in the 82nd percentile on ESPN's website, so 156 plus 87. We'll do some quick math here. Well, not quick math. It's not quick math for me. I suck at math. 157 divided by 243. We finished with a 64% accuracy in terms of picking games straight up on the money line, and then on the spread, I think we did all right. Finished in the 67th percentile in the spread, to be honest with you. So the spread is not something that I've taken the time to go out of my way and do the whole, the hard numbers that go along with it. Because there is a way to, put yourself in a position to where you pick pretty efficiently. Yeah, who would have thought? 55% over the course of the season on the spread, which a lot of people consider to be the level of professional gamblers who are successful, because that 5% is enough, apparently, when you bet enough money to keep, to be sustainable. Like that, professional gamblers live off that 5% for an entire year. So, maybe one day I will take gambling seriously. Until then, I'll just stick with slowly building up money. Anyway, we got stuff to talk about. We got games to talk about. There is not a nuke for this week because this week was kind of fake a little bit. Also, there was so many people who broke records that it was ridiculous. Also, like we said last week, I am officially, mentally, and in my heart recognizing the records that were had. And actually, I have a really good reasoning behind that, because most of the people who actually broke records in week 18 did not play an entire season. So they really played a full 16-game season, which, of course, an extra game is an extra game. There's no question about that whatsoever. I just wanted to point out, the TJ Watt situation. TJ Watt played 15 games this season because of an injury, and he still was able to get the sack record. So there's that. Other stuff going on. We just overall, what this week kind of felt like. There were 3 playoff spots that were still available for teams who were outside the playoffs to get into the playoffs. All the other positioning stuff was decided in terms of seeding based off of wins and losses. And that was something that weighed in heavily, of course, with a lot of these key games. There were multiple playoff teams who actually played each other this past week. And shout out to, like I suspected before, almost every single team in the NFC West being able to come up with a playoff spot. I did not suspect that the Seahawks would be one of the teams that did not end up with the playoff spot, but that's a conversation for another day, especially with the offseason here and in very clear view. So, and actually, this is a weird thing too. We talk about getting guests and stuff like that. I want to start doing this thing called exit interviews, because it's very similar to what happens media-wise with players and stuff like that. After the season's over, they have a final press conference and stuff like that, and then they have an exit interview with each one of the they have an exit interview with the coaching staff where they tell them hey, you need to make sure you turn this stuff in, do this, and then have a conversation with them. So it was actually really cool for me, and in high school and in college as well. Exit interviews, interesting, because you kind of get a chance to sit back and think about everything that's happened. That's literally what it's about. The interview's about this is these small technicality things, but also just a chance to sit back and look back on what the season that was and what you gained from it and what you didn't gain from it. I would love to hear what some reporters who are covering a team that's not in the playoffs anymore have to say about it. So, trying to line that up. Definitely going to be an interesting one in terms of the Seahawks season. But nonetheless, we move on to the teams that have survived the gauntlet that is the NFL regular season. But like I said before, there are 3 seeds that were available. We as a nation, let's be for real, guys, we can all confess we were all a little crazy on Sunday with how hard we were rooting for the Ties. I personally, I felt shame afterwards. I felt a little bit of shame afterwards because I am what people would call a red-blooded American, regardless of who those people who call me a red-blooded American say, who don't think I'm American say. But nonetheless, I felt just a twinge of shame in terms of how hard I was rooting for the Tie. And honestly, it was weird because for the first time ever, the score that is technically neutral, the Tie, is also directly connected to the thing that we all desire the most when it comes to professional sports, and that is pure chaos. And, we root for chaos on this show. We really do. It's one of the few lasting impacts that Martin has had on this show. And honestly, something that he has imparted to me as a sports fan. When all else fails, root for the thing that causes the most problems. At all times, the most problems and the most solutions. That's the beautiful part about chaos. It is good and bad at the same time in the collision of those things. So we should be rooting for the thing that creates the good and the bad all at the same time. So we were rooting for ties because the ties did something that would have been hilarious in a certain situation. We'll slowly build to it as the breakdowns go on. And we are going to break down and talk about every single game that happened. So the Kansas City Chiefs took on the Denver Broncos. This was a Saturday game, which, by the way, my bad. I didn't give you a heads up that there was Saturday football this week, mainly because I totally forgot about it until like Friday night. But yeah, the Chiefs 28, the Broncos 24. This one was a little weird. If you haven't heard, Vic Fangio has been fired. Also, weird wrinkle, the legal case regarding the right of first refusal of the ownership of the Broncos has now been disputed. So I didn't know this, and I didn't realize this until like a couple days ago, and then I read another article about it. The owner and the current owner and previous owner of the Denver Broncos are both dead now. So they apparently the owner who died in 2019 died from like Alzheimer's or something like that. So sorry, dude. But I mean, you were rich, so call it a win, call it even, right? Alzheimer's, whew, that's a doozy. But nonetheless, both of the previous owners of the Denver Broncos have now died, and so the right of like who gets to jump, like it doesn't just become like the Broncos or the Denver Broncos ownership is not like a free agency, right? And so the previous owners were trying to say in the initial deal that they made to transfer ownership to the current owner who died in 2019, they had a deal about they had the right of first refusal in terms of like who can and cannot buy stocks, right? They're saying that was like a huge part of their deal, and a court has now ruled that doesn't matter. Like the deal that two dead guys struck with each other doesn't matter because the guy that you struck the deal with had the right of first refusal. It's not just something that happens for that previous team's ownership in perpetuity forever, right? It was connected to the deal from person to person. And so now there is an argument of whether or not the sons and daughters, the heirs of the owner of the Broncos that died, I think it's Boley, the owner of the Broncos owner that died in 2019, his kids have to agree upon who becomes the majority owner, and if they don't do that, then the Broncos go to open market, which if you really, I get not wanting to have like especially if you got beef with your siblings, you know what I mean? If you got beef with your siblings or something like that, I get not wanting to have and completely surrender complete and total ownership of an NFL franchise to one of them. But I will say this, none of you get money if you all disagree on who should be in charge. And maybe even if it comes down to like, bitch, we'll play paper, rock, scissors for it. You know what I mean? We will play paper, rock, scissors for this absolute money train that we are letting pull out of the station, and we're not in the driver's seat of it or anything like that. So hopefully they figure it out. Maybe they're already rich, and they're rich in the sense that they're financially independent. Maybe they're rich because of the amount of money that their dad gave them and that they inherited, which of course, like if you can avoid doing work and maybe you can just buy Broncos season tickets and call it even. Maybe in the deal for the new Broncos team you work in, like we get a box like forever, or we get a box until you sell the team to another team, and that's the thing that can happen for them with the next ownership group. But of course, the Broncos ownership being open, the general manager still being John Elway, and then the head coach no longer being Vic Fangio. They're out there in the streets looking for a new head coach. Hopefully they find one here pretty soon, and hopefully they are really open-minded about who that person is going to be, because the Broncos do have a pretty talented team regardless of what people have to say about Teddy Bridgewater. And Teddy came out there, and really, if you talk about any quarterback that kind of bugged debunked a lot of myths about him, you would definitely say it was Teddy Bridgewater. I felt like he really, started throwing the ball further and further down the field, which is a huge problem for a lot of people the year before. He got a little risky with the biscuit out there, and they benefited from it. Like the Broncos looked like a legitimate playoff team the first half of the season, and then it all kind of fell apart. Teddy gets hurt in that Cowboy, or they tune up the Cowboys, and then Teddy gets hurt versus was it the Raiders? Teddy gets hurt versus the Raiders, and we don't see him anymore. Anyway, also, the Broncos could have definitely won this game. There was a 47-yard scoop and score that happened, and basically, if they didn't have that turnover, they could have won this one. They really could have. They could have won this one because they were up 21-20, and then they had a 86-yard fumble return, and then it was pretty bad. It's pretty bad. They did score the final point of the game, and it was to make it 28-24. So, geniuses. With 4:37 to go, they thought they were going to get the ball back, and based off of the fact that they had given up so many points to the Chiefs, that did not work out for them. Anyway, the Kansas City Chiefs advance on to the playoffs. Shout out to them. I guess, we all knew they were going to go to the playoffs, but they go into the playoffs off of a win versus a divisional opponent. That's pretty good. They will also be playing against the Steelers in the first round of the playoffs, so that'll be fun for them, I'm sure. Those teams are basically polar opposites of each other, which is hilarious in concept. So, but hey. Whatever. We'll talk about the Steelers situation a little bit later. The Cowboys took on the Eagles. If you did not hear, the Eagles had like 53 dudes on the COVID reserve list. Legitimately, there was a tweet that came out. There was a tweet that I liked. Hold on, let me see if I can find it, because it's really funny to just read it out loud, how the ridiculously long list of names that were on the COVID reserve list. But it was literally pretty much every single offensive starter. And yeah, it was like a shit ton of offensive starters that were on the COVID reserve list, and it was just, I know it wasn't funny because of the situation, because it was COVID, and you never know how that's really gonna fuck with people or anything like that. But it was just like, come on, man! Like they basically didn't play the team that was able to go out there and clinch a playoff spot. So if they hadn't clinched a playoff spot like the week before, they would have been totally screwed. Like, without question, been 100% screwed if that was going to be the situation. And luckily, that was not. It didn't pan out that way for them, and they were able to go out there and clinch a playoff spot before they played the Cowboys, who, once again, threw up 50 points on the Philadelphia Eagles. So that's got to be, if there's one black eye about this season, it is the fact that the Eagles got tuned up by the Cowboys twice this year, and it wasn't even close. The Cowboys kind of getting back to the form that they were in before. Both of these teams advance onto the playoffs, and the Eagles will face off against, let me make sure I got this correct, they will face off against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the reigning Super Bowl champions, and then the Cowboys face off against, in a classic rivalry, if there ever was a more classic matchup in the NFL, I don't know what it is, but it is the San Francisco 49ers versus the Dallas Cowboys in the first round of the playoffs, and that one's going to be fun because that's one of the better defenses in the playoffs that is going up against one of the better offenses. I cannot wait to see how that shakes out. That's like actually one that's such a weird mishmash of matchups that I'm pretty pumped to watch that go down. But I'm sure it's going to be filled with, remember back in the 80s when the Cowboys and the 49ers used to play each other all the time and they were the best in the league, which, you make the playoffs, the best half of the league, I guess. But yeah, we'll talk. Here's one that I actually have a breakdown for because some funny stuff happened afterwards. The Washington football team beat the brakes off the New York Giants 22-7. I know that score is deceiving, but imagine like the Washington football team is like Iowa in college football, right? Where if you lose by 2 touchdowns to them, that's basically the equivalent of losing by 5 touchdowns to anybody else. So Joe Judge was literally talking shit, calling the Washington football team as an organization a clown show, a team that is objectively better than his, like by talent and also by losing streak. So because the Giants were on a 5-game losing streak, that is now a 6-game losing streak that ended their season. Well, their season was over a long time ago, but the end of their season was a 6-game losing streak, which I'm sure New York radio is just being super sensible about, and it's just super, they're really just being cool about it. I have faith that that's what the situation is going on in New York radio, New York sports talk radio. And this is the quote from Ron Rivera after the game was over with, because after you tune somebody up and they were talking shit about you, you get to talk shit your own. You get to talk shit yourself. I mean, for goodness sake, if you pay attention to what's happening, you would have, which once again, bold assumption on the part of Ron Rivera of Joe Judge as like a coach, for him to thinking that he's paying attention to what's happening. You would have found out that they had just had one of our most popular players, a guy that's very popular amongst his teammates, was in a terrible accident where his longtime girlfriend is killed. Yeah, that happened, and it's pretty super dark. Yeah. Pretty bad. We had another player who lost his brother to murder, and then we had another player who lost another brother, Rivera said on Friday. Wait, that was before. Wait, no, it should have been afterwards. I guess that was before. I literally thought I copied and pasted that quote because it was after in the press conference. There's a reason why things happen, and to take a shot at people when people are going through what they're going through, that's not right. If you don't know and understand other people's teams, talk about yourself. Talk about your own team. That's what's fair. And to be honest with you, I'm not trying to hear lip from a motherfucker that has scored a grand total of like 14 points over the past 3 games, I think. I think it's like 20-something. They've scored less than 28 points over the last 3 games of the season. And maybe the Giants should have been worried about some other stuff. Joe Judge also short-circuited. The Giants ran back-to-back QB sneaks. I'm sure you've seen the video by now. They also used like the flying V formation from the Mighty Ducks. They kind of looked like they were like ducks fly together, and then tried to plow forward using Jake Fromm, of all people. And since the season's over with, I would like to remind people that Jake Fromm had his text messages leaked by somebody who he thought was his friend or like his girlfriend's friend or something like that in a group chat where Jake Fromm was saying, man, I wish they would let us buy silencers, because he and that was in reference to the protests that were happening in 2020, which we can only imagine is Jake Fromm saying that he wants to go into the streets and just like pop people off using a silencer. So yeah. Anyway, that's that guy's in the NFL. And people were like super pumped about him playing for some reason. Jake, man, oh boy. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not going to say it. I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on because there's a lot I can say about Jake Fromm and his ability to play football and his genericness as a human being, but I'm not. But yeah, anyway, Joe Judge, Joe Judge not on the show. Joe Judge has not short-circuited. He's living his best life. But Joe Judge short-circuited and out of his own, basically like the shadow of his own end zone. I think he was like on the 1-yard line. He was trying to get room to punt. And on 2nd and 11, he QB sneaked it. And then on 3rd and 9, he QB sneaked it. And I feel like a lot more people were just thought the QB sneak was funny from inside of his own 5-yard line, but they were not paying attention to the fact that he did it on back-to-back plays. This was also following reports that Joe Judge was safe from like getting fired on Black Monday, which is why the Giants fired him on Tuesday. If that I'm sorry, it was hilarious. Yeah, they fired him yesterday. It was pretty funny because I was actually arguing with somebody about like why the Giants didn't want to fire him, and the point of evidence that I pointed out was the fact that the Giants have fired their last 2 head coaches after 2 years as well. They fired Pat Shurmur, and then they fired Vice Principal McAdoo, as Bomani Jones likes to call him sometimes. But nonetheless, guess what? They're keeping the streak alive. If they're not anything, the Giants are consistent. They have now fired Joe Judge after 2 years, and he has been relieved of his duties, and he joins an elite group of people. Like I said, he's the 3rd straight coach to be fired after 2 seasons for the New York Giants, which of course is a great indicator for people who are doing the hiring in a lot of situations. But he is also joining the long, illustrious list and growing list of people who are failed Bill Belichick assistants turned head coaches. Assistants / coordinators turned head coaches. And I will point out one thing about Joe Judge. He objectively got more wins than Pat Shurmur did in the 2 years that he was the head coach of the Giants. I would also like to point out that Joe Judge, I think out of all 3 of the different head coaches that were available, had the most money that was spent in free agency this past offseason. He also had one of the most injured teams in the NFL this season, so maybe it all balances out a little bit. I mean, if you recall, Saquon Barkley was hurt most of the year, which seems like Saquon Barkley's been hurt for a decade and some change, man. But man, can't wait for him to get back to full form. Anyway, hopefully they have learned their lesson in terms of like people that they want to coach their organization. Also, new GM on the way for the Giants because Dave Gettleman has retired. Shout out to him for getting the retirement situation going on before somebody tried to fire him. Also, I think retiring sets him up for pension or something like that. So shout out to him for getting that bread, even though, he drove the Giants probably into the ground. I wouldn't even say he drove them into the ground, but whatever. Dave Gettleman getting his cash on the way out. Minnesota Vikings took on the Chicago Bears. The final score was 31-17. And the only thing I'm going to tell you about from this game is that Justin Jefferson finished 16 yards short of Randy Moss's single-season receiving record. But he also broke 2 other ones in this game. So shout out Justin Jefferson and all the young wide receivers. If you did not catch on, the theme of this week also was wide receiver breaks record. Just literally person who catches passes in the NFL breaks record. That was from player from 10 years ago. From legendary player from 10 years ago. New player ushers in a new record. So there's that. And what was that saying? The Jacksonville Jaguars. This one, ladies and gentlemen, this one really warmed my heart. I can't even lie. I truly thank you to every Jaguar on the planet for making this happen. And by the way, and not making it dramatic at all, literally giving us an entire second half of football to sit back and be like, wow, they really blew it. That's probably what the Colts were sitting and thinking on the sidelines. But yeah, shout out to the Colts for giving us the funniest collapse of all collapses this season. The Jags pulling off one of their greatest victories of the entire season, because not only did they get a win, but they got to hurt the Colts to the point where, guess what? The Jacksonville Jaguars and the Indianapolis Colts, I wouldn't even say that they're on even footing right now, because the Jacksonville Jaguars still have their first-round draft pick. So, yeah, fantastic. I would also like to point out, if you didn't catch on, the Jacksonville Jaguars 26, Indianapolis Colts 11, and in the course of this game, the Colts had to come in and literally beat the worst. Well, they literally had to beat the worst team in the NFL by record, even though they're not one of the worst teams in the NFL. Which I get, man. It's hard to sit back and think It's hard to sit back and look at the Jags, Texans, and Lions and try and figure out which one of those guys is the worst team in the NFL, because they're not terrible. They're just not consistent at all. They're just inconsistent on many different levels. I would say the Jaguars have been the most inconsistent, and maybe that has to do with some leadership stuff. But yeah, the Jacksonville Jaguars are the team that had the least amount of hope out of those 3 teams that I just listed, and are probably they're probably in the best situation talent-wise, because they're getting more high-level draft picks, and they have key players at key positions. Anyway, we move on to this funny-ass game. The Jacksonville Jaguars 26, Indianapolis Colts 11. The Colts are officially eliminated from the playoff race. They will not be advancing on, and all they had to do was beat the worst team in the NFL, who just so happened to be a divisional rival. And if you know anything about the NFL, divisional games are ripe and juicy and plump for massive upsets in the NFL. Honestly, divisional games keep the NFL afloat, because a lot of bad teams play really well against teams that they're very familiar with in terms of play style, situations, and stuff like that. And you see a lot of teams in the NFL take advantage of that. So even the Lions play competitive games. And I feel for a long time, I've been looking back and I'm like, man, if it wasn't for these divisional games and you just play random teams every single year with no pattern to it whatsoever, how close would some of these games actually be in the grand scheme of it all? I just also like to break down what a fantastic season the Colts had. They had the number 1 rusher in the NFL in Jonathan Taylor. They had 8 playoff teams on their schedule, by the way. They had a really tough run in terms of teams that they had to play. If they weren't in the AFC South playing the Jags and the Texans twice a year, many could argue that they had one of the more difficult schedules. If not, they would have a top 5 difficulty schedule, especially when you look back on it retroactively, because they played 8 playoff teams. They went 4-4 in those games versus playoff teams, and 5 of those 8 games were decided by 1 touchdown or less. I would also like to point out the none of the games that were decided by all the games that were close, they won those. Except one. Oh no, all the games that were close, they lost them. And all the other games that were like blowouts, they won those. So they literally lost to, I want to say, 4 playoff teams by a combined 28 points or something like that. But yeah, it was pretty impressive, like what the Colts have been able to pull off this season, especially considering how bad their defense started off this season, and they kind of picked up the tempo as the season went on, and they got a lot better in terms of the secondary, and the pass rush finally started showing up, and they look like one of the more well-balanced teams in the NFL, because for whatever you have to say about Carson Wentz and some of the brain-dead plays that he likes to brain fart plays in terms of like just throwing the ball to the defense, which happens. It's happened multiple times. Don't forget, Carson Wentz has shovel passed to a defender twice this season for an interception. One of them was for a touchdown. Do not forget that. But the Colts, like they're a team that, if you look, like Carson Wentz is an immensely talented football player. At one point, I think at multiple points in his career has been what we perceive to be the MVP of the NFL. When he was with the Eagles, they were that season where they had the most injuries in the NFL, and then of course the Super Bowl season where he tore his ACL. You could perceive Carson Wentz as the MVP of the NFL, like twice in his career. How many times did that happen for any quarterback in the course of like a very short amount of time that he's been in the NFL? But nonetheless, they felt like one of the more balanced and one of the best teams, because if they just got a couple great throws from Carson Wentz, which he's capable of, he just doesn't do it consistently enough for people to actually rely on him to do it. But if they got a couple of great throws from Carson Wentz, they were like set. They look like a legitimate quote-unquote playoff contender, right? And I'm sorry, they look like a Super Bowl contender and like a team that could potentially heat up in the playoffs, because they've been playing so consistently in comparison to like a lot of other teams in the NFL. But they're at home with the Jaguars. They're at home chilling, and a lot of people, including myself, because that eliminates one horrifying scenario from happening for me. So the Tennessee Titans are the number 1 seed overall in the AFC, right? Spoiler alert. And then the Colts would have made as a wild card seed, which would have opened the potential for the Cowboys, who are in the playoffs as well, to play the 3 teams that I hate the most. Which I hate the Cowboys, I hate the Titans, and I hate the Colts. Right, that would open up the door for literally a nightmare scenario in terms of NFL football for the Super Bowl for me. So I'm not looking forward to having to sweat it out for the Titans in a playoff game, especially considering they got a first round bye. So I'm not a fan of that. Everything else though is looked pretty awesome playoff wise, because a lot of the AFC is teams that I'm a little shaky about. And I like that feeling. I like that feeling of being a little unsure about who the actual good team in the room is, right? And I would say the AFC's got better teams, because a lot of those teams have like clutch wins, whereas the NFC has high-end teams who are like front-runner type teams. Like you look, like the NFC, and this is how I see it, like the Cardinals, front running team that got a lot of blowout wins early on in the season that looked super dominating. LA Rams, front running team that looked like they were running the NFC West. The San Francisco 49ers are like definitely, they slid in there at the last second, right? Cowboys, front running team out of their division, front running teams in terms of like how they started the season, tons and tons of points. The Eagles, a team that's not a front runner at all, a team that honestly, like they clawed their way into the playoffs, and I'm very impressed with what they've been able to do, and love to see Jalen Hurts succeeding, because once again, Jalen Hurts has proven this season that he is literally everything that everybody tried to convince you that he was not. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the ultimate front runner in the NFL. The Packers, front running team in the NFL, right? Like they've played a couple of close games and not looked good, but for the most part, they've just been annihilating their teammates. The Raiders getting in on the final weekend of the season. The Bengals sneaking up out of the AFC North, where we thought the Ravens were going to finally put it together and win a back-to-back AFC North championship. The Steelers were kind of lurking around the entire time. The Browns looked like a Super Bowl contender the first half of the fucking season and then blew it away. And now we're looking at the Bengals as a divisional champ in Super Wildcard Weekend coming up. The Patriots, who, I mean, you could say they're the classic front-running team, but let's be for real. This season, they have not been. They've been led by one of the most dominant defenses in the NFL, and then they've been very sketchy about the consistency of Mac Jones throwing the ball down the field, right? Like the big time plays and the big throws down the field has been questionable. The Buffalo Bills, a team that had all the hype last year when they were in the AFC Championship game and lost to the Kansas City Chiefs, who advanced on to the Super Bowl, but now they are the team that has had to grind out multiple wins. They've had some ugly losses this year. They've had some decent wins, but they're still not the team that we saw just a year ago. The Steelers, the ultimate underdog in this whole situation. People hate Ben Roethlisberger. They have a top 5 defense in the NFL, and quite frankly, they have an offense that just doesn't show up some drives consistently. That doesn't even do the courtesy of killing time off the clock for the defense. They have an offense that goes out there and literally just gets 3 and outs. The Kansas City Chiefs, they were a team that were a front runner without question. They had that whole sketchy part of the first half of the season, and they kind of picked it up a little bit towards the end. But then we just talked about that win that they just had versus the Broncos, where they win by 4 points when it's all said and done. And the fact of the matter is like they were basically, the Broncos were 1 turnover away from potentially winning that game. The Tennessee Titans, without Derrick Henry, were looking a little suspect on the back half of the season. The AFC side of the tournament bracket, like every single one of these teams can get to the Super Bowl. Every single one of them. Even the Steelers. Like, I think in the back of our mind as fans of football, we all know that it's possible. They look terrible and they look ass, but if you watched multiple Steelers games, which I sadly can confirm that I have, that team can technically beat anybody. Like, they make so, I don't know how they do it. They make a shit ton of mistakes and they're somehow able to wipe them away. But what they do really, really well is make people pay for the mistakes that they make against them. And on top of that, like, they're literally they're too good Ben Roethlisberger drives away from being able to be effective. That it's so weird to think about it that way, but that is how it is. Every single one of these teams in the AFC can go to the Super Bowl. The Cardinals looking real suspect right now. The Rams looking suspect, and they have to play each other in the first round. The 49ers, a team that people are like, do you even really have a quarterback, right? The Cowboys, a team that look real suspect towards the back half of the season. As a matter of fact, like I said, a lot of these teams have moments in the back half of this season that make you question, like, what the hell's going on over there. You know what I mean? But yeah. No, I look at the AFC side of the tournament bracket, and I think I see better teams overall, despite how good the teams are in the NFC. Maybe that's weird. Maybe you disagree. Hit me up on Twitter. Let me know at FB_playbook. Hit me up on Instagram at the Ashton Forever. You can even hit me up on TikTok, bro. Like, you can hit me up on TikTok and tell me what you think. But yeah, there's something weird about all those AFC teams, and maybe it's because the Texans are in the AFC, so I naturally think the AFC is better than the NFC when it's all said and done. But like the teams in the AFC have shown that they can overcome adversity. The teams in the NFC shown that they collapse under it all the time. Like, talk about the Cardinals and the Rams just off the top. But yeah, anyway, moving on. The Browns took on the Cincinnati Bengals in the season finale. If you didn't catch this one, they did not start any of neither starting quarterback started because Baker Mayfield is scheduled for surgery because he's got like 7 injuries he's got like 17 billion injuries. One of them is a torn labrum that he needed to get surgically fixed, and I think that happens this week or something like that, and he's gonna be recovering for like 6 weeks. Anyway, the Bengals played this one. There's nothing on the line in this one, so Brandon Allen went out there and played for the Bengals, and for the Browns they had Case Keenum. I'm 0% surprised that Case Keenum was able to win a game, especially against another NFL backup. Case Keenum is very good at his job, and that is to be the wiliest of the vets. He is the wiliest vet in the NFL, and there's no question about that whatsoever. Right next to Ryan Fitzpatrick, probably the best backup in the NFL. Just facts. Tennessee Titans beat the Houston Texans 28-25. The score is deceiving because at one point the Tennessee Titans were up 21-0 in this game. And to very few, if you are a Texans fan or a Titans fan, when you saw the Texans coming back in this game, you were 0% surprised. You were just disappointed because it was yet another game where there was supposedly a clear, decided winner before the game started, and then the game kind of goes the way you think it does, and then the other team comes back. It's exactly what happens every single time these two teams play each other. Divisional matchups are weird. Anyway, the Titans ended up winning when it was all said and done. They had a clutch final drive that was centered around Dante Hilliard doing his thing, which, by the way, you want to talk about really impressive part of the Tennessee Titans whole, like, we have the most injured players in the history of the NFL. We've rostered the most players in the history of the NFL for injuries and stuff like that. The running back situation has been spectacular for them, man. For a team that at one point started Adrian Peterson, they went out there and just absolutely flawless not even recruitment, but like general managing play from the Tennessee Titans throughout the back half of this season. And then, of course, like the adjustments made by Mike Vrabel and his staff. But like, dude, there is no way you're not telling me that this is very similar to the Eagles a couple years ago, where it was like you don't get to have the kind of success the Eagles had because they won a playoff game, got to the next round, lost to the Seattle Seahawks. I think it was like 2018, 2017 or something like that. And you sit back and you're like, man, the way that they got to this point, all 53 dudes on the roster have to be dudes. Like, all 53 dudes on the roster got to be on point because things are going south quickly and everybody's got to play. And you can't have dudes that are missing a beat. You can try and talk about scheme, you can try and talk about alignment and stuff like that, but you got to have people who are going to go out there and make plays, right? People know their playbook, people are playing, people are executing at a high level, and they're going out there and making plays for the Tennessee Titans defense and offense, really. And that's what's been amazing in the back half of the last like 5 games of this season, especially with Derrick Henry out, that I'm not surprised that Ryan Tannehill's been able to sling the thing around the field. I was just surprised at the kind of efficiency he was getting out of the wide receivers. And of course, with A.J. Brown back, now they have a very clear, defined number 1 wide receiver, and they don't have to depend on Chester Rogers as much. No offense to Chester Rogers. He's just no A.J. Brown. That's just facts. Detroit Lions 37-30. Many people could say you're concerned about this game because the Packers seemingly were trying in this one, especially considering if you listen to the Pat McAfee show, which I try to do sparingly, but the Aaron Rodgers clip where Aaron Rodgers was on the show like he always is. I think it's like every Tuesday or something like that. But Aaron Rodgers was on the show and he was talking about how somebody just blatantly made up a lie about Aaron Rodgers protesting the Super Bowl because if he has to get tested for COVID again because his 90-day window of after having COVID will expire right before the Super Bowl. Somebody said that he was going to go and protest the Super Bowl by not playing, and he was gonna force Jordan Love into the game or something like that by the Packers. And then he basically was just like, yes, you think that if the Green Bay Packers, led by me, get to the Super Bowl, I'm willing to die on the hill of I shouldn't be tested for COVID and the NFL's COVID protocols are BS, and that I would choose to not play in the Super Bowl, the height of his sport that he has dedicated years of his life to trying to perfect and hone, right? And he just kind of was like, he's like, yeah, I'm the kind of person who I played in week 18 after we had already locked up the number 1 seed in the NFC. I played in week 18 versus the Detroit Lions to sit out the Super Bowl. That's what I did. That he literally was just like, you have to be kidding me in terms of like these thoughts and these lies that people are saying, especially from his quote unquote inner circle. But and then of course Pat McAfee and his boys like kind of stroked him off a little bit there when they were like clapping for him because he said something that was like blatantly obvious, where it's just like, yeah, it's kind of messed up when people lie about me. And I'm like, come on, man. Like I get it. He's your friend, but like and you know what, to Pat McAfee's credit, he's not a journalist. It just looks bad, man. And on top of that, he's a far more popular podcaster than I. He's a far more popular broadcaster than I am, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's a lot funnier than me, but clapping, like literally him and his boys were like clapping for Aaron Rodgers after he said the answer of like, oh yeah, they totally made that rumor up about me, and how dare they question my dedication to football, which is like common sense, like duh type stuff. Because I do get it. There's a lot of people who think that Aaron Rodgers is out here leading the alt-right movement to fight against COVID, and he thinks that he thinks that he's out here leading the movement for the white supremacists and all this kind of shit like that, and the super conservative people, when actually he's just an idiot. So you know, You gotta learn the difference, guys. I know it's a thin line. It's a thin line. He's an idiot about COVID. I don't know. All I know is I've listened to Aaron Rodgers speak before, and he's got some interesting ideas. Some of them are half-baked. Some of them are fully cooked out. I saw everybody was losing their mind because he had like some book of like a very he had like some really childish book on his bookshelf behind him when he was doing like an interview on Pat McAfee's show or something like that, and people were like roasting him for it online. Anyway, I don't know why. You know what? It's better than me talking about what happened in this game between the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. The Lions get to ride off into the sunset with a win versus the Green Bay Packers, which is something the Minnesota Vikings couldn't do. Well, no, the Vikings got the first win versus the Packers. Anyway, yeah, the Lions, if there was ever a team that finished stronger, they finished strong in the back half of this season, and there were teams that were competing for playoff spots that got completely fucked by the fact that the Lions were competing hard. But 37-30 was the final score. The Lions get a clutch win to end the season. I mean, it doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things, but Dan Campbell proving that he might be the guy for the job these last couple of months. So hopefully the Lions don't do what they always do, and that is, of course, push away things that are good for them. So shout out Dan Campbell for a pretty strong season, because there was a lot of points where the Lions were on that losing streak, and we all thought they were going to go 0-16, and I legitimately was like, that's not an 0-16 football team. Although I did pick them to go 0-16, so I feel pretty confident about the fact. By the way, I picked 3 teams to go 0-16 this season. None of them did. I picked the Lions, the Colts, and the Arizona Cardinals, who were in the playoffs and look like one of the weaker teams in the NFC. But, just pointing it out. Maybe I know a thing or two about football. I was wrong about my prediction, but there have only been like 7 teams in the history of the NFL to go 0-16. So I'll take it. I was pretty close with the Lions, though. But yeah, that's the whole Lions situation. 37-30. Shout out to them. The Steelers take on the Baltimore Ravens in what, quite frankly, is super sad for the Steelers, who won this game because Tyler Huntley was still quarterbacking. By the way, any point are we going to talk about the fact that Lamar Jackson just didn't finish the season? He had like a bone bruise that was previously reported as an ankle injury. Little interesting, I'll say that much. And hopefully we start getting the truth here at some point about what looks to be a lot more serious of an injury than we thought to be. But nonetheless, this was a big-time defensive matchup. The Baltimore Ravens defense has been asked to do so fucking much this season, despite all the injuries that they've had. And not surprisingly at all, this one came down to a field goal in overtime for the Steelers to win it. And Ben Roethlisberger coming up with a game-winning drive that set up the field goal, because it was looking a little sketchy there for a second. He had to throw a pretty nice dart of a pass over the middle to get it completed. But nonetheless, the most important thing out of this was the fact that the Steelers did get playoff hopes out of this, because now, due to the Jaguars beating the Colts, the door was open for the Steelers to be able to be in the playoffs as long as the Raiders and the Chargers did not tie. And lo and behold, the NFL schedule, flawless as it is, the Raiders and Chargers were Sunday Night Football that night. So we all had to, we all got a chance to like sit back and think about it, ponder it, send out some tweets, throw out some hot takes, and people took advantage of that. But nonetheless, the Steelers 16, Baltimore Ravens 13. Tyler Huntley, who looked pretty impressive early on in his stint as the backup quarterback, but as you guys know, when it comes to being a backup quarterback, it is a short-lived power. If you are labeled the backup quarterback, you play really well for about 2 or 3 games, and really, honestly, the elite backups, they play good for 4 or 5 games, right? And give the team a chance to win, and they can't come up with anything. Tyler Huntley was able to get the offense to move at times against one of the better defenses in the NFL, but when it was all said and done, man, you can see it. They scored 13 points, right? By the way, TJ Watt tied Michael Strahan for the most sacks ever in NFL history. Shout out to him. He did it in 15 games. Shout out to him. There was like a really interesting sack that it was basically a fumbled snap from Tyler Huntley. The center tossed it low. It hit off Tyler Huntley's hands, then his ankle. He recovered it, and then touching TJ Watt was the first person to touch Tyler Huntley before he tried to take off when he was on the ground, and that technically downs the quarterback for a loss, which is the definition of a sack, but it did not count because it was an aborted snap by the rules of the NFL, which is, of course, a snap that goes awry and you try to run to regain yards, which I think should still count as a sack, even though it looked a little sketchy. But he tackled the quarterback for a loss by touching him down. So that is a sack by the rules. But yeah, also, by the way, I felt like super weird. Michael Strahan's rookie season was 1993, which means that I was 1 year old when Michael Strahan played his first year in the NFL. I did not know he was that old, that much older than me. So, yeah. Mark Andrews also caught the most passes ever in Ravens history this season. He broke that record. He had 8 catches in this game, and he honestly has cemented himself as like a top 3 tight end in the NFL. It's got to be Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Greg Kittle, George Kittle, and pardon my take, way too much. George Kittle and Mark Andrews up there are the guys that you got to be looking at, right? Like them, and then Mike Gesicki and a couple other guys. But tight end wise, Mark Andrews is one of the best in the game, and no surprise here, he breaks the Ravens catch record, and that was, by the way, established by Derek Mason, Hall of Famer Derek Mason for the Baltimore Ravens. So a pretty good season for Mark Andrews, who a lot of people questioned his blocking ability when he was coming out of Oklahoma. Turns out when you catch the ball like he does, you don't find yourself blocking too much. But yeah, moving on, the 2 teams, tell me if you've heard this joke before, 2 teams with no playoff hopes walk into a bar. The Saints played the Falcons. It was the final score was 30-20. The Falcons beat 2 teams with a winning record this season. And they beat one team. Yeah, no, they beat 2 teams with a winning record this season because they beat the Saints earlier this year, and then by losing to the Saints, they helped the Saints finish with a positive 9-8 record overall on the year. The Dolphins also, we'll talk about it a little bit later on. The Dolphins also won their game versus the Patriots, meaning that the Falcons beat 2 playoff contenders because the Saints had a playoff path to end the season. And they also had like a sick interception, like a sick one-handed pick in this game. Definitely go back and watch the replay of that. I really don't have too much to say about this one. The final score is 30-20. The Saints go marching into the offseason. And the Falcons, honestly, the Falcons are in like a weird spot. They got a new head coach who looked like he did a really good job because there was a lot of times where the Falcons looked like, the Falcons went out there and they beat teams that they were better than, which is the first step to beating teams that you're not better than. So what you look at what the expectation was at the beginning of the season, because a lot of people suspected that the Falcons were going to be picking top 5 in the draft, and then to see Calvin Ridley, who did not finish the season, obviously because of mental health stuff, but like Russell Gage, Cordero Patterson, AJ Terrell, Mike Davis, and Kyle Pitts, who, by the way, is the second rookie in NFL history to ever reach 1,000 yards at the tight end position, so that's pretty impressive. And then, of course, like Matt Ryan, who apparently is coming back next season, they got some stuff that they can build on. They also got a lot of work in terms of like building a defense this second time, this second year for Arthur Smith. It has to be like almost completely redone, and we'll see what happens in the offseason for them, man, because they got zero pressure this year, and they've been a team that has really struggled with generating pressure for the past like 5 years, and it still hasn't been fixed. I don't know, I'm not a genius or anything like that. I'm not like a general manager, nor do I aspire to be one, but man, it's hard to believe they haven't stumbled into like 3 high-quality defensive linemen. So hopefully that's the big emphasis over the offseason, because generating pressure helps out the secondary, and helping out the secondary helps you get stops on deep passes down the field, which of course makes it easier for your defense to play overall, and then of course makes it easier for your linebackers in general, and they can focus on stopping the run, and it sets you up for the long run, especially if you can get pressure consistently, not just on third down. So yeah, that's it. For the Saints, obviously the biggest thing was they had a top 5 defense and a bottom 5 offense. And maybe, just maybe, there starts to be a conversation about Taysom Hill and his. I know they signed him to like a modified hybrid contract or whatever, but people need to like legitimately be asking what the fuck the deal is. Why? Like, honestly, I don't get why he's still on the team. Like, I get it, he's got a couple of like really good runs or anything like that, and I hate to sit here and talk about a player and why and try and take money out of somebody's pocket or whatever. But my thing is, like, there have been a lot of quarterbacks who are black that do what Taysom Hill does at the quarterback position, and they do not find themselves signing contracts for $44 million. And I think it's pretty obvious that that's the situation now. So it's a major question of, like, what makes Taysom Hill so special other than the fact that he's white. Because that's the only thing that I can think of when I see Taysom Hill. And I hate to be that guy in terms of, like, talking about racism, but, like, Taysom Hill is the epitome that, like, he is the crowning jewel of, like, what racism looks like to a certain degree. And I'm not saying that Sean Payton's racist, but to like, it's what bias looks like. Because there are a lot of quarterbacks who have shown the lack of ability to throw the football consistently, like Taysom Hill does, but have the great ability to run people over and run through players and stuff like that, like Taysom Hill does, that are no longer playing football, or, like, don't ever get a legitimate shot to play football. So I find that, like, intriguing that Taysom Hill, for some, like, he's the special one, even though we just saw the last couple games of the season, he's not. Jameis is more than likely going to be the answer. Hopefully he'll be able to get back and be somewhat even close to the athlete that he was before. Not to say that he was like some supreme athlete or anything like that, but he did play 2 sports when he was at Florida State. Anyway, but yeah, there's that. That was a severely that tangent was anger. I'm not even gonna lie. The Miami Dolphins 33, New England Patriots 24. Dolphins wideout Jalen Waddle broke the rookie receptions record. He also he caught 102 passes this season, which is kind of crazy. Anquan Bolden set that record back in 2003. So shout out to one of the greatest to ever do it, Anquan Bolden. The Dolphins are now 3-1 versus the Patriots the last 4 times they played each other, and they are 6-4 in the last 10. Weird trend. Very strange trend. By the way, the NFL is back on its bullshit. The Dolphins inexplicably fired Brian Flores, and then all of a sudden a shit ton of reports came out about how Brian Flores is an asshole, he's a douche, and he's been petty and mean with the players and stuff like that, which I'd like to point out. There was another coach in the NFL, and guys, this is how you identify the bullshit, kids, and all the youngsters out there. There was another coach in the NFL who really, actually, genuinely was an asshole, and the bad things about him didn't come out after he got fired. They came out while he was coaching. And yeah, Jacksonville is a much different place than Miami in terms of news media, which is why if Brian Flores actually was an ass, I would imagine it would come out pretty heavily. I feel like it would be a thing. If Brian Flores was kicking players during warmups, if Brian Flores was saying fucked up shit to players during warmups, or trying to be like a petty tyrant of a small organization, right? Of an organization in general, I feel like it would come out, especially considering the color of Brian Flores' skin. But for some reason, it was all kept under wraps until after Brian Flores was fired, and then now everybody's free to say what they wanted to say. Although Urban Meyer, many would argue, one of the most powerful coaches in all of football in general because of his success in college, and then of course his TV access, and now at the time the head coach of a NFL franchise. A lot of people have a lot invested in not saying bad things about him, especially kind of with the reach and power that he has in many different avenues, but for some reason they were totally fine saying it while he was coaching. It's almost like one of them was actually an asshole and the other one is having his name dragged through the mud. But what do I know? I'm just a dude that talks into the microphone. By the way, Penguins are cool again. Shout out Jalen Waddle for that clutch celebration every time he touches the ball. Makes you want to see him score more touchdowns because it is really funny to see massive $1 million athletes go over and waddle inside of NFL end zone. It's pretty funny. The Seattle Seahawks beat the Arizona Cardinals 38-30, and yet another example of goddamn how much damage can turnovers do to an NFL team. The Seattle Seahawks in this game had a let me make sure I get it right to tell you the absurdity of what happened. The first drive of the game, the Seattle Seahawks turned the ball over off of a scoop and score fumble that was a touchdown. That would be the only points that the Cardinals scored. There would be the only touchdown the Cardinals scored until the third quarter. Just putting it out there. But yeah, it was a 16-yard fumble return. And then immediately afterwards, Russell Wilson does the thing where he makes the ball go off the screen, and then it's magically in Tyler Lockett's hands, and then Tyler Lockett is magically in the end zone at the same time. But yeah, the Seattle Seahawks were like really easily running through, really easily killing the Cardinals defense, which is how you get the 38 points, right? Like they were cooking in this game. But yeah, it was interesting how that all shook out when it was all said and done, because it really felt like if the Seahawks hadn't turned the ball over those two times, because one of them was a interception that got down to the 5-yard line, that this score would have, it felt like that the Cardinals would not have scored other than these two touchdowns. It felt like the Cardinals would have had two touchdowns taken off the board if it wasn't for those scoop and scores. So they would have like 14 points. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say, because we're going to talk about the sketchiest teams in the NFL, the way that their season ended at the end of this show, and you bet your ass the Arizona Cardinals are on it. So the Buffalo Bills 27, the Jets 10. Moving on, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers played the Panthers. The final score was 41-17. Tom Brady broke the passing touchdown record for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that he set last year. He had 43 passing touchdowns this year, and I think that's like the most he's ever thrown in a single season. So yeah. Oh, crazy one out of this one. This is ridiculous. Mike Evans has now had 8 consecutive seasons in the NFL with 1,000 receiving yards, and is the most in NFL history, and that's not surprising. Mike Evans is an amazing wide receiver. The really weird part about Mike Evans is that he did not play high school football until his senior year of high school, and then he went to Texas A&M, and it was history. Mike Evans was so good that people thought Johnny Manziel was good at football. That's how good Mike Evans is. But yeah, San Francisco 49. I'm just saying, like Johnny Manziel probably owes that Heisman to Mike Evans. San Francisco 49ers 27, the LA Rams 24 in overtime. This was a heartbreaker, but not all that surprising, especially considering that makes 12 consecutive wins for the 49ers over the Rams. The Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp, if you didn't hear, he got that triple crown, baby. Receptions, receiving touchdowns, and receiving yards this season. Absolutely astounding. He had like 800 and something yards at like week 6 of the season or something like that. It's kind of crazy. But he did not get the single season receiving record. I think he needed like 100. I think he needed he caught for 118 and he needed 135, so he was not that far off. And yeah, it would have simultaneously broken Michael Thomas's catch record and Calvin Johnson's receiving yards record if he had come up with like 10 catches and 138 yards in this game or something, or 135 yards in this game. But it was not to be, especially considering the Rams were too busy doing that thing where they make us all think that they're not good at football anymore. But yeah, the big thing to take out of this one is the Rams continue to do things that make you think that they are not consistent whatsoever. Like they have a ton of talent, but are not a football team just yet. And that, I think, is pretty good indicator, especially considering the Rams got out to a 17-0 lead in a game that resulted in them finishing with 24 points. You can see how that's a problem, right? Like the offense completely shutting off. I think we all can see how that's a major issue. And there were two. I mean, the turnover battle was even across the front, but yeah, you guessed it. The 2 turnovers for the Rams were interceptions, meaning that Matthew Stafford now has 8 interceptions in his last 3 games. Nothing to be concerned about there. I cannot tell you if they get embarrassed or if they lose this first round playoff game. The number of people there's already a large contingent of people that believe that Matthew Stafford is the most overrated, like number 1 pick in NFL, or like in the NFL. He takes the least amount of heat for the fact that he has underperformed at a lot of levels, and it's of course because he played for the Lions. And honestly, I'm willing to give everybody every single break that's under the sun if you play for the Lions. But this season, in particular, the last 4 games of the year, they are looking like they are not looking bueno. They are looking like they are fully prepared to completely lay an egg. Luckily for them, they're playing the other team in the NFL that looks like they are fully prepared to lay an egg in the first round of the playoffs, and that is the Arizona Cardinals, who, like we just mentioned before, if it weren't for 2 turnovers from the Seattle Seahawks, would probably be they would have scored 14 points in that game. Because, quite frankly, there's a touchdown that basically got credited to the defense. They got the ball to the 4-yard line, and the other one was actually a defensive touchdown. So, yeah. The Raiders took on the Chargers in one of the most dramatic games of the entire season. Probably one of the best games in the entire season because it had its ups and its downs. It looked like the Chargers were really out there cooking. The Raiders swinging back almost every opportunity that they could and finally took back the lead because they're one of the few teams that was able to make the Chargers have to punt on consecutive drives. A interesting attempt to go for 4th down by Brandon Staley. It was 4th and 2 inside of his own 20-yard line that obviously it got stuffed by the Raiders, and then obviously that turned into points for them. I will say it's a little wild that they had a turnover. The Raiders at one point had a turnover that was turned into a field goal because the defense for the Chargers had many moments where it looked very, very suspect overall, but the fact of the matter is there were so many PI calls in this game, it was ridiculous. And a lot of them were there was that huge call with Bryan Edwards where the ball landed 25 yards away from where Bryan Edwards apparently got knocked down. But it was something, man. It was a ton of fun to watch this game overall. It was the best version of the Raiders that I have seen all season, and mainly because the defense came out there and they played really well, despite the fact that they gave up 32 points. The defense came out there and they made a ton of key plays throughout the course of this game. But yeah, it was something to see, man. The Raiders, that combination between Derek Carr and Hunter Renfrow was clutch. Josh Jacobs finally got some room to run because there was a lot of times this season where the runs seemingly were very predictable for some reason. But overall, the Raiders 8 of 17 on 3rd down. 8 of 17 on 3rd down. The Chargers had to go for it on 4th down 7 times because their last drive they had to complete 3 4th down conversions, and truly one of the best drives I've seen out of a quarterback this season was definitely what we saw from Justin Herbert. And that if that's not something to look forward to in terms of a young football player and how young that Chargers team is, I don't know what it is, man. They were terrible in terms of defending the run this season. They had a lot of really tough times in terms of defending deep passes down the field. I know Asante Samuels Jr. is a rookie that was one of the, he got cooked a bunch of times this season, which is expected, by the way. A lot of people expected him to come out there and be his dad, and that's just ridiculous. His dad took years to become the great football player that he was. But nonetheless, their pass rush was struggling a little bit throughout the course of this game. Throughout the course of the season, they struggled to stop the run, and it came to bite them later on. And it came to bite them square in the ass later on, and this went in overtime because of Justin Herbert's absolutely amazing final drive to go out there and make it happen. I thought they were potentially going to go for 2 to try and finish it off and go to the playoffs, but they go for the PAT without question. They kick the PAT. They get into overtime. The Raiders get a drive. They get forced to kick a field goal. The Chargers get a drive. They get forced to kick a field goal. The Raiders come out, and right around the 50-yard line, they start to slow down significantly to kill all the time on the clock. They get down to a situation where they have a 3rd and 4 on the Chargers 46, and Josh Jacobs, by the way, this whole time that this is going on, we're seeing the clock run like really, really quickly. Like there's nobody stopping the time. There's nobody stopping the clock whatsoever. It gets down to like 32 seconds. And then Brandon Staley calls the timeout, and everybody was just kind of like, everybody who's a fan was sitting back and thinking it looked a lot like the Raiders were just kind of chilling out because they were outside of field goal range when that third down snap started. And then they got into field goal range off of a 10-yard run from Josh Jacobs, which I think was like one of the longest runs he had that entire game. So it's not like you're sitting there and you're Rich Bisaccia, who, by the way, shout the fuck out to Rich Bisaccia. Came in clutch, man. Clutch. Interim, like, I don't get how that guy's not like, I get it, he didn't coach the entire season or anything like that, but he's got to be a candidate for coach of the year. They've had some amazing wins this season, and it's hard to not connect it to one, his whatever he's doing as like the head coach. But basically, that they were not in field goal range until Josh Jacobs ran for 10 yards in a obvious run situation that the Chargers couldn't stop because once again the Chargers have the worst rush defense in the NFL. But there's no way you're sitting there and you're just like, oh, we're going to get 10 yards on this run, especially considering the first two runs you had on that drive, you got 4 yards. You know, they got 6 yards because they got down to 2nd and 11 and then it was 3rd and 4. You know what I mean? Like that kind of is weird for a coach to assume like, yeah, we're going to get in the field goal range off this running play, and if we don't, we're just going to kick the field goal. Anyway, that is more believable than like we thought we were going to get in field goal range. But they were so far out of Dan Carlson's field goal range that when they started that 3rd and 4, I actually looked it up. They started that 3rd and 4. They were at the fringe range, the maximum range that he had kicked from that season. They were actually 1 yard. It was like 57-yard field goal when third down, before the ball got snapped on 3rd and 4, which was after the Chargers timeout. They were at a 57-yard field goal, which would be 1 yard longer than Dan Carlson's longest kick of the season. So it's like they were not in field goal. They were not in reasonable field goal range to go out there and finish off that play, to go out there and finish off OT, which is the weird part about the whole thing, because people were acting like, well, obviously they were going to run the time down and then kick the field goal. I'm like, well, the field goal was a fucking coin flip, and maybe they knew they were, and of course it was because the Raiders were in a situation where if they make the field goal, it's only them that goes to the playoffs, and if they miss the field goal, both of the teams in the game go to a playoff because it's a tie or whatever, and that's fine with them. That makes a lot more sense. But to say that they were playing for the tie is actually reasonable, because the tie doesn't matter. The tie is the same thing as winning in the long run. Like, it's a tie on your record, but it's a win to go to the playoffs. So it is an option that is on the table, whether you intentionally want to do it or not. You know what I mean? So to all the super smart football guys out there, because Emmanuel Acho and Stephen Ruiz of the 11 Personnel podcast, which you should listen to. No, it's from Four Verts, which is with Charles McDonald. You should listen to that podcast too. 11 Personnel specifically about the Rams. Just a heads up. The Four Verts is the Stephen Ruiz, Charles McDonald podcast, which you should check out if you want to learn more about football as a whole, and if you want to get perspective on the teams that are in the NFL to kind of control and curb how you look at football. It's just reasonable. But yeah, Stephen Ruiz is like, what are you guys talking about? There's no way that they were actually going to go for the tie on that one. They were trying to get personnel in. The Chargers were trying to get personnel in to set up to get in a better run defense, because, like, sad to say, my guy Kenneth Murray had really been struggling out there. And really overall, it's because the defensive line penetration was struggling too. Like, the offensive line for the Raiders was just like bodying the Chargers up front. That's just facts. Which of course makes Kenneth's job more difficult and makes it more difficult for everyone. And whatever. I'm not gonna get into that. That's a dumb conversation. But nonetheless, just know that it was like a combination of people. It wasn't specifically on one person who was struggling with the rush defense the entire season, because like that makes no sense. Rush defense is usually a product of defensive linemen struggling to hold gaps and or a difficult concept called two gapping, which is crazy to think about, which is like you're in control of the gap. You're in charge of the gap that's in front of you while you're so if you're a defensive lineman, you're facing the offensive lineman. The play starts, you both are going to the right-hand side. You're in charge of defending if the running back runs to the gap that is directly in front of you to your right, and if they cut back and go to the one on your left, which is difficult to do, especially if you're a D tackle, because there's an offensive lineman on either side of your gap. So it's like super difficult. Anyway, but yeah, they had the worst rush defense in the NFL, and they were changing up their personnel to be able to stop the Raiders if they ran the ball on third down, which of course they did, and they gave up 10 yards anyway. So to try and argue that people were not playing for the tie is a little much for me, especially considering the whole comment made from Derek Carr after the game was over with. But and then the fact of the matter is, like, people can't admit that they were trying to go for the tie because hashtag NFL rigged is like a real thing. Like, there are people who legitimately believe that, and I believe that there are people who do not understand the individuals that play football because they've never hung around enough football players. But to try and believe that the players are in on an elaborate scheme to control the scores is interesting, because that's a person who doesn't understand the work that it takes to get a team of two people to do the same thing in unison when they know what is going to happen, let alone a team of 11 and another team of 11 on the field to do what is necessary, plus all the subs. So, like, if there's a conspiracy to rig the NFL, all 53, every single 53-man roster has to be in on it. Every single ref has to be in on it. And has to be some pretty damn good acting, because I could swear the way that these players get hurt, they are balling out of fucking control to try and make something happen. Anyway, just it takes like half a second of thought, half a second of brain power to try and figure it out. Anyway, with that being said, I thought I would end the show talking about the three sketchiest ends of the season for NFL teams. And you tell me what you think after the show is over. Hit me up on Twitter at FB_playbook. Hit me up on Twitter at the Ashton J, and you tell me the teams that you, or the team or teams that you thought ended the season in the sketchiest manner possible. Here we go. My three, pretty obvious. The Arizona Cardinals, and it's not just the last game of the season that really did it for me. It's like basically the last 2 months the Arizona Cardinals have done exactly what we saw last year. Kyler Murray gets hurt. The ankle injury hinders his ability to scramble or whatever, which he got sacked a bunch versus the Seattle Seahawks, because Poona Ford had 2 sacks when that game was all said and done. But nonetheless, I think a lot of it has to do with, one, DeAndre Hopkins is out, which is going to change when they go to the playoffs, right? Like, they've been waiting on him to get healthy, and they said that he's not coming back into the playoffs. And the other thing is the way that their offense runs, where every wide receiver is kind of running an option route depending on the situation and depending upon the play call and what the defense is showing them. That is hard to stay in sync with, in terms of making sure you as a wide receiver, you as a corner, you as a wide receiver, you as a tight end, and then of course the quarterback are all seeing the same type of defense, and how to attack it is difficult to understand and difficult to maintain consistently. And then on top of that, like, the separation situation too. Like, are the wide receivers getting enough separation? Because what we saw earlier this season, like, Rondale Moore was tearing it up in terms of yak. We saw Rondale Moore was tearing it up in terms of yak. We saw Christian Kirk tearing it up in terms of his ability to get open as well. AJ Green, who, by the way, if there's any wide receiver that's looked really good the back half of this season, or the last like 4 games of the season for the Arizona Cardinals, it is AJ Green. He has looked fantastic, and especially considering the way the Bengals treated him as if he was just like not good at football anymore. He is proven that wrong multiple times this season over. But yeah, DeAndre Hopkins getting back is going to be huge. It seemed like even the run game wasn't working versus the Seahawks in a couple of times this season. So, by the way, the defense is like off a cliff again. don't understand how that happened. They played so well when Colt McCoy was under center, and I get it. They were playing divisional opponents when Colt McCoy was playing, and they were able to go out there and look amazing. They've generated a ton of turnovers this season. They got 2 of them versus the Seattle Seahawks, right, to end off the season. But they're looking rough. Number 2, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I can't really explain this one. Sometimes when you've been watching football for like such a long period of time, just something feels weird. Something feels weird about the fact that they struggled versus the Jets last week. And maybe it's because they were trying to go out there and make the incentives happen the last 2 weeks of the season. But the fact that the fact of how bad the NFC South was this season and how easy they made it look at times, including that game versus the Buffalo Bills, I don't know, man. Like, it's just a weird feeling that I got when I watch them. And maybe it's centered around the injuries and stuff like that. Maybe it's because they don't look exactly like the team that they looked like last year. And that makes me skeptical of that they're going to be able to make that happen in terms of getting to the playoffs. Even though I just talked about how, like, the NFC is filled with teams that can be got. I feel like that, despite their records, there's a lot of weak teams that are in the NFC playoffs. But only time will tell. And then, of course, number 3, the LA Rams. The LA Rams look like the sketchiest team in the playoffs, like straight up. Next to the Arizona Cardinals. I cannot wait to see how these two teams play each other. Like, that's the number 1 playoff game that I need to watch, straight up. Because the Rams have all the talent in the world. Like I said before, it seems like they're a collection of really, really, really good players who are not a team yet. So, Matthew Stafford has that great connection with Cooper Kupp, but he's also got really good wide receivers in Van Jefferson and Odell Beckham Jr., and it doesn't seem like they see the ball as much. Tyler Higbee had an amazing end to the season. He scored. Remember I talked about how the Rams got out to a 17-0 lead. Those 2 touchdowns were from Tyler Higbee, their tight end, who they missed him big time when he was out for COVID on that Monday Night Football game. But it's the turnovers, man. Like, the turnovers have been like relatively consistent, and they're picking up at the worst point of the season. So, and then like they're going up against the Arizona Cardinals, who have generated a ton of turnovers this year, and if the Cardinals can get 2 turnovers from the Rams, they're probably going to run away with that game. They look like they are the best team, probably like talent-wise in the playoffs, that looks the worst, hands down. They're like top 3 in talent in the NFL playoffs overall, and they are the most suspect team. The Cardinals, at least, they have the whole situation where they have a ton of offensive talented football players or whatever, and their defense is like the side that doesn't have like the quote-unquote high-level talent type stuff like that, but they're doing something that we've seen before. But the Rams are the most talented team that causes the most questions, hands down. And on that note, I will take my leave. Shout out to everybody who tuned into the show. Appreciate everybody who did. If you want to get in touch with me outside of the show, hit me up on Twitter at FB_playbook. Hit me up on, I guess you can leave a comment underneath the YouTube video. Make sure you like and subscribe. Follow on Twitch at Broke Boy Sports. Same thing for YouTube, Broke Boy Sports. Hit me up on Twitter. Hit me up on Instagram at The Ashton Forever. I'm on TikTok at The Ashton Forever as well. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I am out of here. Wash your hands, wash your ass, wear your mask, and take a shower. Take a shower. Do that for yourself and do that for me. Appreciate that. Go home, Roger.